The silence in that conference room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 85 employees sat frozen as Robert Kellerman, our CEO, slammed his fist on the glass table. Even the usual keyboard tappers and pen clickers went dead quiet. Every breath felt like it echoed off the walls. "Stand up right now and apologize to my son for your incompetence, or clean out your desk," Robert announced, his voice bouncing around our company's main conference hall. His son, Brandon, hired 10 months ago and mysteriously promoted to senior project manager just last week, sat there with this smug little smile. I was nervous as hell as 85 pairs of eyes turned to me. I'm Rick Patterson, by the way. 52 years old, been in cybersecurity for 20 years total, 12 in the Army, then 8 in the private sector. Last 4 years here at Secure Tech Defense Solutions. Never thought I'd be sitting in a corporate firing squad at this stage of my career. I stood up slowly, chair scraping against the floor in that dead silence. The walk to the front felt endless, each step echoing like a countdown timer. Robert's smile got wider, thinking he had me trapped. He figured I'd crumble under public humiliation rather than lose the job I'd held for 4 years. Guy never really knew me at all. I connected my personal device to the display system. The projector hummed to life. "I believe this will clarify the situation," I said, keeping my voice steady. Robert's smile vanished when I didn't launch into an apology. Instead, I tapped the screen. Brandon's voice filled the room. "Dad, I totally screwed up the secure bank penetration test. I accidentally exposed their live database credentials in my report. But don't worry, I already told everyone it was Rick's fault." Then Robert's unmistakable voice. "Perfect, son. Keep blaming him for everything. Once this $200 million government contract goes through, we'll restructure anyway. Just hold tight until our bonus clears." Shocked gasps rippled through the room. Robert lunged toward me, his expensive shoes clicking on the carpet. "That's private. Turn that off immediately." Our board chairman, William Hayes, held up his hand. "Continue," he said, his face hardening. I nodded and played the next recording. "Just delete his security protocols before the Pentagon meeting," Robert instructed. "Say there was a version control issue. We need them to see only your framework, Brandon." "But what if they ask technical questions I can't answer?" Brandon whined. "Then you look at Rick and say, 'Perhaps you can explain why your system failed these basic tests.' Make him look incompetent." With each new recording, Robert's face lost color. Brandon sank lower in his seat, no longer smirking. Hayes stood slowly. "How long has this been happening?" I met his eyes directly. "Since Brandon was hired. I have time-stamped copies of my original security protocols alongside the altered versions he submitted under his name. This isn't just about me. I've spoken with 3 former employees who experienced similar treatment before being forced out." The room stayed absolutely still as I disconnected my device and returned to my seat. Robert stood frozen at the front, mouth opening and closing without sound, but I knew this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. "Look, let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. Until 10 months ago, I was the go-to guy for cybersecurity here at Secure Tech. Spent 20 years building my reputation through solid work and battle-tested security frameworks. My colleagues respected me. Upper management consulted me. Government clients specifically requested me for their projects. Then Robert hired his son, Brandon. I remember Brandon's first day. Designer suit, expensive watch, introduced himself by announcing he'd graduated from Stanford with an MBA. Later, I found out he'd barely passed and been on academic probation twice for cheating. Should have seen that red flag coming. "Rick, you'll be mentoring Brandon," Robert announced during a department meeting 3 days after Brandon started. "Show him everything you know about our security protocols." I noticed several colleagues exchanging glances. Everyone understood what mentoring the boss's son meant. Babysitting an entitled kid while maintaining my full workload. Been there, done that in the Army with generals' sons. That afternoon, Brandon sat beside my desk, scrolling through his phone while I explained our penetration testing procedures. "This is so boring," he sighed after 10 minutes. "Can't you just give me the executive summary?" "Understanding the methodology is crucial," I explained. "Otherwise you can't identify real vulnerabilities when you're in the field." "Otherwise what? My dad runs this company. I don't need to understand every technical detail." Yeah, I should have seen it coming right then, but I still believed in merit and hard work. Still believed the system would reward competence. What a fool I was. The first project I assigned Brandon was straightforward. conduct a basic security audit on our internal email system. I gave him templates, clear instructions, and my direct extension for questions. Standard stuff we'd done 100 times before. 3 days later at the department review, Brandon presented a completely different analysis than what I'd requested. The audit was superficial, missing critical vulnerabilities, and several conclusions contradicted our established security standards. When Hayes asked about the discrepancies, Brandon turned to me with wide eyes. Rick told me to do it this way. I was just following his instructions. Every eye in the room turned to me. That's not correct, I said carefully. The instructions I provided were standard protocol for... Are you calling my son a liar? Robert interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Here's the thing. In the military, you learn to recognize an ambush when you see one. This was textbook. But I was caught in civilian territory with civilian rules. The meeting continued with me trying to salvage the presentation while defending my reputation. Afterward, Robert pulled me into his office. Guy had this corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, probably cost more than my annual salary to furnish. If you can't work effectively with Brandon, maybe we need to reevaluate your position, he said, examining his nails like he was bored. He's new and learning. You're supposedly experienced. Any failures reflect more poorly on you than him. That was just the beginning. Over the next few months, Brandon took credit for my successful work while blaming me for his mistakes. Security protocols I developed were mysteriously altered before reaching government clients. Client emails I sent were intercepted and modified. My performance reviews went from excellent to mediocre practically overnight. Colleagues who had once sought my technical advice now avoided me in the hallways. 20 years of building my career was dissolving before my eyes, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it through normal channels. The breaking point came during preparations for the Pentagon cybersecurity contract, the biggest deal our company had pursued, $200 million over 5 years to secure critical defense infrastructure across 15 military installations. I spent weeks developing comprehensive security frameworks, analyzing threat vectors, and creating detailed implementation strategies. Brandon contributed nothing except complaints about the long hours and questions about whether we really needed all this security stuff. The night before our presentation to the Pentagon Review Board, I stayed late finalizing my protocols. The office was nearly empty when I heard voices from the break room. In the Army, you learn to move quietly and listen carefully. Old habits. Dad, I'm worried about tomorrow. Rick's security framework is really complex. What if they ask me technical questions about penetration testing? I froze outside the door. Brandon's voice had that whiny quality it got when he was stressed. Don't worry, son, Robert replied. I've already spoken to Hayes about your concerns regarding Rick's work. I suggested you present an alternative framework, which I'll help you create tonight. We'll let the Pentagon decide which approach is better, but his protocols are actually solid. I ran them through the testing suite. Security can be implemented many ways. We'll just frame his as unnecessarily paranoid and expensive. Trust me, by next month you'll be leading that department and Rick will be looking for a new job. I backed away silently, mind racing. Everything suddenly made sense. The altered reports, the missing emails, the whisper campaign against me. This wasn't incompetence or office politics. This was a coordinated operation to destroy my career. That night, I made a decision. Time to go operational. I would document everything, started keeping my phone nearby during meetings and saving every version of my work, with digital timestamps. Not for revenge, for survival. The next day, I watched in silent fury as Brandon presented his alternative security framework to the Pentagon board. It was an almost exact copy of my work from 8 months earlier, but with the encryption standards weakened and the monitoring protocols simplified. Basically, he'd taken a bulletproof vest and removed half the Kevlar. I'm concerned about the overly complex approach Rick prepared, Brandon said, flashing a worried look at the board members. It's unnecessarily paranoid and could slow down critical operations. My framework maintains security while improving efficiency. I waited for someone to recognize my previous work, but no one did. Or if they did, they said nothing. Military guys on the board should have caught the technical flaws, but they were focused on cost projections. After the meeting, Hayes called me into his office. Rick, I'm concerned about your recent work. Brandon's framework seems much more practical for our operational needs. Sir, the framework he presented Uses outdated encryption that's vulnerable to standard penetration tools. Any halfway decent hacker could. Are you suggesting you understand Pentagon requirements better than our senior project manager? He interrupted, nodding toward Brandon's newly assigned title on the org chart behind his desk. I stared at that chart. Senior project manager. Brandon had been with the company less than 11 months and contributed exactly nothing of value. Meanwhile, guys with security clearances and 15-plus years experience were still stuck in analyst positions. No, sir, I finally managed. I'll review my approach. Good. We need team players here, Rick, especially with the contract evaluation phase coming up. For the next 2 weeks, I gathered evidence like I was building an intelligence file. Recovered original emails from server backups, compared document versions with their altered counterparts, recorded conversations when legally permissible, checked state laws first, naturally, reached out to former employees who'd left under similar circumstances. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about Brandon. Robert had been systematically pushing out talented employees who might threaten his position or refuse to play along with his schemes. He'd built loyalty through fear and favoritism, not respect. Classic authoritarian playbook. 3 former employees confirmed the pattern. Sarah Martinez, former network security specialist, forced out after refusing to sign off on substandard firewall configurations. Mike Rodriguez, former penetration tester, pushed out after questioning inflated billing hours to government clients. Jennifer Walsh, former compliance officer, restructured out after raising concerns about documentation irregularities. All had families. All had needed their jobs. All had kept quiet to protect their references. Then came the week that changed everything. The Pentagon contract was proceeding based on Brandon's flawed framework, and security issues were emerging exactly like I'd predicted. Rather than acknowledge these problems, Robert decided to find a scapegoat. Me. The morning before the all-hands meeting, he cornered me in the elevator. "Tomorrow's meeting won't be pleasant for you," he said with that tight smile he probably practiced in the mirror. "But if you publicly apologize for your mistakes and acknowledge Brandon's superior work, I might consider keeping you on in a reduced capacity. Maybe move you to our internal IT support team." I looked him directly in the eyes. "And if I don't, then empty your desk before you leave today. Your choice, Rick. But understand, I have connections throughout this industry. One phone call from me, and you'll never work cybersecurity again." The elevator doors opened, and he stepped out, confident in his victory. He had no idea what was coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. My career, my reputation, my daughter's college fund, everything I'd worked for hung in the balance. Was I really prepared to risk it all? At 52, starting over in cybersecurity isn't exactly easy. Most companies want young hotshots, not graying veterans. As dawn broke, I made the call that would change everything. Dialed up Jonathan Hayes, a buddy from my Army days who now worked cybersecurity for the Defense Department. We'd served together in Iraq, and John understood the importance of operational security better than most. "John, it's Rick. I need you to witness something today. Everything all right? You sound like you're planning something." "Maybe I am. Can you meet me for coffee before work?" We met at a diner near the office. I showed him the recordings, the altered documents, the pattern of sabotage. John listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes in that careful way intelligence guys do. When I finished, he closed his notebook. "Why come to me instead of your board directly? Because Hayes has been dismissing concerns about Robert for months. You're the only person with enough pull who might actually care about what's happening to a Pentagon contract." He nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Attend today's meeting. Witness what happens. Then decide if this company should be trusted with national security." John checked his watch. "I'll make some calls. But Rick, once this ball starts rolling, there's no stopping it. You sure you want to go down this road? Already too far down to turn back." I arrived at the office an hour before the meeting. As I walked through the lobby, I noticed unfamiliar faces in suits speaking quietly with Hayes in his office. The conversation looked serious, a lot of hand gestures and document passing. My desk phone rang. "Rick, come to my office now." Hayes's voice was clipped. Walking across that floor felt like crossing a minefield. Every eye tracked my movement, speculation rippling through the department. They all expected today to be my last day. Hell, maybe they were right. Hayes wasn't alone when I entered. Two Pentagon officials in dress blues and a woman I didn't recognize sat with him. John was nowhere to be seen, but I caught his reflection in the window, standing in the hallway, observing. "Close the door," Hayes said. I did, fighting to keep my breathing steady. "These are serious accusations you've made," he began, tapping a folder on his desk. "Robert's been with this company for 14 years and generated significant growth." "Yes," I agreed, "by taking credit for other people's work and eliminating anyone who threatens his position." The unknown woman leaned forward. "I'm Patricia Wells from DoD Inspector General. We've reviewed the materials you provided to Mr. Hayes. While recordings made without consent can be legally problematic, the documentation of altered security protocols presents a pattern we cannot ignore." Here it comes, I thought. They're going to protect Robert and throw me under the bus. "However," Patricia continued, "the testimonies from former employees and the compromised Pentagon framework present a national security concern that supersedes internal company politics." Hayes sighed heavily. "We're in a difficult position. The Pentagon contract is proceeding based on security protocols that may be fundamentally flawed." "They are," I confirmed. "But there's still time to implement proper security if we act quickly." The Pentagon officials exchanged glances. "The all-hands meeting begins in 20 minutes. Robert expects to publicly discipline you, after which he'll announce Brandon's promotion to department director." "And now?" I asked. "Now we want to see exactly how far they'll go," Hayes said. "You'll attend the meeting as planned. Let Robert make his accusations. Respond as you see fit. You're using me as bait. We're giving you the opportunity to defend yourself publicly," the Pentagon official corrected, "something you've earned through 12 years of military service." As they laid out the plan, I realized I was walking into a coordinated operation. If Robert felt threatened, no telling what he might do or say. My evidence might not be enough. My career might still end today, but at least I'd go down swinging. The main hall filled quickly as employees filed in for the mandatory all-hands meeting. I took a seat near the back, ignoring whispers and sidelong glances. Brandon sat with the executive team at the front, posture radiating confidence. Kid had no idea what was about to hit him. Robert stood at the podium reviewing his notes, occasionally looking up to scan the room. His eyes found mine. He smiled that predator smile. Hayes opened with standard announcements about quarterly goals and upcoming projects. Then he turned the floor over to Robert. "Thank you, Bill. Before we discuss department updates, there's a personnel matter we need to address." His voice carried easily across the room. "Over the past several months, we've experienced concerning issues with security work coming from our cybersecurity team, specifically work overseen by Rick Patterson." A murmur rippled through the audience. "Here we go." "Most recently, his flawed security protocols nearly compromised our Pentagon contract. Fortunately, our senior project manager Brandon identified the problems and provided corrected frameworks." Robert's gaze swept the room like a sniper acquiring targets. "This pattern of undermining company initiatives cannot continue. Rick, please stand." And there it was. The moment everything had led to. I rose slowly, aware of every eye turning to me. In the Army, we called this contact. The moment when planning meets reality and everything goes to hell. "Accountability is a core value at this company," Robert continued. "We all make mistakes, but refusing to acknowledge them is unacceptable." I walked to the front of the room, connected my device to the display system, and looked Robert straight in the eye. "You're absolutely right about accountability," I said. "So let's talk about what really happened." That's when I hit play. Brandon's voice filled the room crystal clear. "Dad, I totally screwed up the secure bank penetration test. I accidentally exposed their live database credentials in my report. But don't worry, I already told everyone it was Rick's fault." Then Robert's unmistakable voice. "Perfect, son. Keep blaming him for everything. Once this $200 million government contract goes through, we'll restructure anyway. Just hold tight until our bonus clears." The silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. Then the shocked gasps started rippling through the room like a wave. Robert lunged toward me, his face red as a lobster. "That's private. Turn that off immediately." Hayes held up his hand. "Continue." I played the next recording. "Just delete his security protocols before the Pentagon meeting," Robert instructed. "Say there was a version control issue. We need them to see only your framework, Brandon." "But what if they ask technical questions I can't answer?" Brandon whined like a kid who forgot his homework. "Then you look at Rick and say, perhaps you can explain why your system failed these basic tests. Make him look incompetent." With each new recording, Robert's face lost more color. Brandon sank lower in his seat, no longer smirking. Kid looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "You'll never work in this industry again," Robert shouted, completely losing it. "Do you know who my contacts are? Who I play golf with? You're finished." "That's enough," interrupted a voice from the back. Every head turned as John walked forward, accompanied by the Pentagon officials I'd met that morning. "This meeting was supposed to be internal," Robert sputtered. "I invited them," Hayes said coldly, "after receiving concerning information yesterday." Robert's face went white as he realized he'd walked straight into an ambush. He turned to Brandon, who looked equally panicked. "This is a misunderstanding," Robert insisted, his voice getting higher. "Those recordings are taken out of context. Rick's been underperforming for months. Ask anyone in his department." "Actually," said a quiet voice from the third row, "that's not true." Sarah Martinez, a junior security analyst I'd barely spoken to in weeks, stood up. Took guts for a junior employee to speak up like that. "Rick trained me when I started 2 years ago. Everything I know about penetration testing came from him. But 3 months ago, Robert told me to simplify Rick's security protocols to make them more user-friendly. When I refused, I was removed from the Pentagon team. One by one, other colleagues stood up. Each had a story. Pressure to alter security standards, instructions to exclude me from meetings, directives to report my non-existent mistakes. Robert looked wildly around the room, his carefully constructed empire crumbling. "Brandon, tell them. Tell them how Rick tried to sabotage you." All eyes turned to Brandon, who seemed to shrink in his chair like a deflating balloon. I just did what you told me to, Dad." The Pentagon representatives moved forward. "Mr. Kellerman, we need to speak with you privately about these allegations, particularly as they relate to the security protocols presented to the Defense Department." Robert grabbed Brandon's arm. "Say nothing without our lawyer present," he hissed. Then, trying to salvage some dignity, he straightened his jacket and addressed the room. "This is a witch hunt based on misleading evidence. The truth will come out." As security escorted them from the hall, Hayes stepped to the podium. "This meeting is adjourned. Department heads, join me in the conference room immediately. Everyone else, take an early lunch. We'll send communication this afternoon." People filed out in stunned silence, some offering quiet words of support as they passed. Others looked away, probably ashamed they hadn't spoken up sooner. Hayes approached as the room emptied. "That took guts," he said quietly. "More than I've shown clearly." 3 months later, I'm sitting in my new office, Robert's old corner office actually, reviewing applications for our expanded cybersecurity team. The Pentagon contract proceeded on honest terms after we implemented proper security protocols. Our stock took a hit when the scandal broke, but recovered quickly as clients responded to our new transparency initiatives. Most importantly, we implemented a comprehensive whistleblower program designed with input from employees who'd been victimized. No one would ever face what I had faced. My phone buzzed with a text from John. "Lunch today. Have updates on the new DoD security standards." I smiled, remembering how it all began. Not with some grand plan for revenge, but with a simple refusal to be silenced. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth, no matter who doesn't want to hear it. The company promoted me to Chief Security Officer with a 40% salary increase. Brandon ended up taking a gap year that's lasted 3 months so far. Word is he's working at his uncle's car dealership, learning what real work feels like. Robert? Last I heard, he was facing federal charges for defense contract fraud. Turns out the FBI takes a dim view of compromising national security for personal gain. But here's the thing that really matters. My daughter Emily called last week. She's a junior at State studying cybersecurity, inspired by watching her old man fight the good fight. "Dad," she said, "I want to work somewhere that values integrity like your company does now. That's worth more than any promotion or salary increase. Building something better for the next generation, making sure they don't have to fight the same battles we did." If this story resonates with you, remember this. Sometimes standing up for what's right is the only choice that lets you sleep at night. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. You don't have to be a hero to do the right thing. You just have to refuse to be part of the problem. That's how you change the game.